So our next speaker is a leader at the forefront of responsible enterprise-level AI adoption in the higher education sector. So since 2022, Shainal Kavar has served as CIO at La Trobe University, where he leads enterprise-wide digital transformation, customer-centric service delivery, and the university's ambitious AI-first strategy. Shainal is actually a fellow Unimutual director, and he brings deep IT and technology expertise to the board, which is a valuable contribution. The strategy that he's undertaking at La Trobe was launched in partnership with Microsoft Australia and New Zealand, and also with CyberCX. It's positioned La Trobe as a national trailblazer in responsible and scalable AI innovation. Shainal's prior roles include senior leadership at Downer Group, Spotless, Anderson Consulting, Logica CMG, and Clarity Consulting. And this gives him decades of global experience in technology strategy, architecture, and organisational transformation. Today he'll take us inside La Trobe's AI governance framework, innovation culture, and lessons learned from adapting an agile startup mindset within a large educational institution. So I'll welcome Shainal.
Thanks, Darren. Thank you. And I asked to be mic'd up because it's easier for me to just walk and use my hands. So coming after those two fine speakers, it's a really tough gig to be here after listening to those fabulous talks this morning. But there was a question that Tanya had earlier about, what keeps you awake at night, or don't you sleep? I don't sleep well at all because of my role. So I'm the CIO at La Trobe, and AI is just one more thing that is really challenging for me in keeping effectively our university running. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. So I'll get the clicker going. So today I wanted to share our journey as a university. Now I have some La Trobe colleagues, and one of them is from the risk team, so I am going to call them out because I would like to talk about risks. So what I'd like to do is just take you through how did we get going? What drove this? How did you get started? What have we learned? What's worked? What hasn't worked? And I could spend a whole day talking about what hasn't worked as well, because that's the reality of what we face in the university. And more importantly, where we're going. Now, we hadn't planned the sequence of slides this morning, but what the speakers before me have said echo and fit nicely with what we've learned and where we're going as well. What I'd like questions from you, please. Now, I'm happy to take questions as we go along, or at the end. I'll make sure there's enough time for questions. I'll use up all the time talking otherwise. But I do want questions. If we run out of time, I'm happy to take questions during lunch or in the dinner or during breaks. Our view at the La Trobe is we share openly, so I'm happy to share any of this and what we've done with any of your institutions. So the question we had earlier on, and this started in 2023, is not what can it do? It's we know that this will truly transform and change what we do as a university. And I'll deep dive into a few areas on where it has. But the most important question is, how do we make it trusted, safe, and repeatable inside real workflows? It's not about tech. So I'm not here as a CIO talking about technology today. I'm here talking about strategy, risk, and outcomes for the university. And more importantly, what it does to teaching, learning, and research. So we had to get moving, because if you're not sure, there's always uncertainty, but if you delay, you're not going to make any progress at all. So this slide, and I hope it's clear enough, I'll just talk on a few things on our journey. So we started this in 2023. Lots of detail on the slide. I'll call out a few things if I can. One, university-led. So strategy-led. Deputy Vice-Chancellor, academic, the Chief Operating Officer, myself, the deans. This is before our new Vice-Chancellor started, to shape what will AI do for our university. And so that drove really putting words down. What does this mean? How will it change? What are the outcomes we want for teaching, learning, and professional for our university? The second, we had a new Vice-Chancellor that started later that year. Now, those of you that have heard Professor Theo Farrell, he is passionate. He sees this as completely transforming what we do in the sector and for the university. So we got going. What did we do? We did a number of things in parallel. AI policy, because you need a good policy document in any university. an AI strategy that articulated outcomes, real-world use cases and where we saw the potential. Some have eventuated, some haven't. And also governance. So we put governance in place. It's a twofold governance. One is an responsible AI governance committee chaired by the Vice Chancellor. So all of this is led by the Vice Chancellor and the senior exec group. We, in my technology function, are a core enabler and a part of this. But it's all about business outcome and strategy, if I can use that word. The second is we set up an ethics committee that reports to the AI responsible committee that determines, are we aligning with ethical frameworks, both government and mandated by the university, and our Deputy Vice Chancellor Research chairs that. So you will see we have exec-led strategy and outcomes driving what we're doing in the university. One thing we also did, for those of you that have heard of Arizona State University, their CIO, Lev, is transformational in what he's done. So we had heard him speak. He set up an AI accelerator. They're of completely different scale and funding to Trobe. They started with 20, so I started with 2. So I picked a head of technology. I put one of my existing team, and we set up something called an AI accelerator. And the second person I picked was a change and adoption lead, because this is more important from a change and adoption for the university than the actual technology. So how do you infuse and drive this across the university? I am going to run out of time. So this slide indicates our journey to date. So 23, 24, get the technology foundational, security, privacy controls in place, establish governance, start experimenting, start to learn in a safe manner. And they're very targeted, specific experiments across the uni, which I'll share with you in a sec. But also deploy Copilot. And I have a slide on how we've deployed Copilot, but more importantly, how we're using AI. We have just signed a deal with OpenAI that will allow us to scale this to every staff and every student over the next 2 years. Why is that important? Not only does it address the skills that we need in researchers, academics, and our students, but also address the equity issue. Because at the moment, only some have these tools in our university, and students don't have it. So how do you deal with equity? So OpenAI plays a really key part in our strategy moving forward. That's only slide 1, and I am going to run out of time. So effectively, the last few years have been early startup. Now, using that term in a university is really challenging, but that's what it is. But institutional support from the Vice Chancellor, there's nothing like a Vice Chancellor saying, we will do this to get everyone behind what you have to do in the university. What helps is that we're a very cohesive leadership team driving the ambition for the university. So lots of pilots. Tanya talked about capability building. We spend a lot of time in building capability, not just handing out tools. So if I pick an example, just handing out a Copilot license doesn't build any capability at all. But how do you do that at scale is something we are facing now. But learn, go out, engage. We engage with every part of the university, from our legal team, risk team, who ask some really tough questions on the use of AI, to academics who have been using it on their own, but not sanctioned tools by the university. So we touch every part of the university. Started with 14, we now have about 750 users of this that have infused it into agentic agents and workflows across the university. So the shift from 23, 24, 25 was lots of learning, lots of where we want to go, and honing ambition for the university. So what are those real-world use cases? How are we going to infuse that into the DNA of the organization? And I'll talk about academics in a sec, because our real focus is on the academic stream and on students for the next few years. But how do we do this at scale? So the challenge we now face is we've learned a lot, we've got lots of runs on the board, we know what doesn't work, but how do we do this at scale across 30 to 40,000 students, 4,000 or 5,000 staff, consistently, safely, ethically, ensuring we don't break any laws, make sure we align with all the governance that's needed for a university, as well as our own policies that are applicable. So how do we focus on assessment and the redesign of assessment for the university? And how do you scale capability across staff? We poll our staff all the time. Some are using it anyway. They have their own paid subscription. Some are resisting it. There's real challenges in terms of the use of AI, the environmental impacts, the social impacts, the human impacts that we're having to deal with in the university. So all the work we do is tied to strategic horizons. So when we first started, we thought it's all about productivity. It's not about productivity. That's a given. It will be infused in workflows across all parts of the uni. Our focus is on differentiation. What makes us different? How do we align our AI-related use cases for differentiation and disruption? They align to some very specific strategic focus areas. Now, none of this so far I've talked about is about technology. This is all about outcomes for the university. Focus on how do we accelerate growth in a very changing and tough environment, student caps, financial pressure. So how do you drive growth? How do you create new markets in the university? Second, how do you provide personalized student experience? So our nirvana would be one-on-one personalized tutoring for a student at scale based on what their learning needs are in their language and recognizing cultural needs as well. But how do you do that? You need technology, you need data you can trust, you need to be able to do it safely and securely, and huge other ethical considerations for using the technology. The third is enhancing staff experience. The reason I focus on student, we want our students to come out across every discipline with next generation AI skills, be it law, engineering, IT, OT, physio, nursing. So they should have those skills infused in curriculum. A lot harder to deliver than reality as we're learning. So the partnership in my world with the DVC academic and DVC research are the key, because they are the owners and drivers for the strategy. How do we incorporate that into what they do, and how do we put that in the hands of the students and the educators? They're the best ones to use the technology out there. So for us, this anchors our decision making. It's not about the tech. It's not about let's get a new large language model to do X, Y, and Z. Now, it would be remiss of me not to talk about governance with a group of risk and governance professionals. There's real tension in this area, and I'm going to pick on Andreas from our risk team. Andreas, please pick up your hand. We have real tension in terms of being able to provide certainty on the use of AI in something that is not deterministic but probabilistic. And so how do we do that when we actually don't know in some cases of how some of this technology will work? So the governance that we put in place is now being revisited, because that's the next iteration of what's needed. So our steering committee, as well as the ethics committee, as well as the checkpoints we have from an IT review, a legal privacy review, need to be enhanced. Lots has changed in 2 years since we put that in place, but huge amount of tension because we haven't worked it out as yet. And we're still grappling with it this week on what the next generation of governance should apply to the use cases. We're very clear on the decision making. Those two committees are the ones that decide on behalf of the whole institution. So Tanya talked about institutional-wide support. That is what's driving progress in decision making. The fact that you've got a vice chancellor chairing that with a very strong focus and interest, and the senior exec are fully behind that, makes a huge difference. So it's not the IT guy trying to put new toys and tools in the organization at all. So this is about true changing what we do. But for us, it's the how do you move at speed? Because the technology is changing. How do you make sure you don't break any laws? That you're doing things ethically? That we still meet our obligations as a university? So the governance model and how we amend it is a real point of friction. So we're very keen to learn from others that do this very well. We're working through what that next generation looks like at the moment. So what are some of the risks? Simon earlier asked the question about, well, what are the risks that we see? So these are real risks that we face today. Some I call are managed. So these are things we're aware of that we can put our hands around, that we can do something about. But there's huge amount of shadow risk in an institution like a university. By nature of what we do, we have researchers, academics, students, the things they do. So shadow risk is my biggest challenge. So if I put on my cyber and CIO hat role, That is what keeps me awake at night. It's the advent of tools and our inability to address and respond to that quickly, because we are facing unprecedented technology that we can't keep up with. Even our Security Operations Center is seeing the influx of AI trying to get into our core networks now. So we can't respond that quickly. So if you look specifically at managed risk, we're very clear about what's sanctioned. We've never banned anything. There are a few that have come from federal government that are banned, but we would just follow federal government guidelines. However, we provide sanctions tools for use within the university, like every other institution. So with clear communication and training, please do not put our data, privacy, IP, etc. into public tools. People are using all sorts of tools out there, and we can see it on the network. Data exposure is our biggest challenge. Is our data getting out there? And AI is exponentially exposing data issues we've already had in universities of what we've kept, how long we've kept things. So it's just shining a light on data, the quality and the management of data. So that's a huge risk for us, which is something that has to be dealt with irrespective of AI. Automatic decision making without human oversight. Now, for all the things we manage and control, there's always a human in there, so it's very thought through and controlled. But we can't control what people are doing out there that are unsanctioned. And so how do we get our hands on what that is, other than to education? Fragmented experimentation is also a shadow risk we see, because people are doing all sorts of things out there. So, and I'll speak openly, because our Vice-Chancellor encourages people to use AI, you can imagine what people are doing. Not only are they using every free tool that's out there, they're also coming to me to say, hey, I saw this beautiful tool, can I have it? Can we buy it and can we plug it into the network? I'm like, we can't do that. So that's the downside to having someone that's so passionate about changing and the use of AI in a university. So the risks, we're very aware of the risk. Have we got a handle on every possible risk? Absolutely not. We have a huge amount of work to be done, both from privacy, security, risk, to manage this effectively while balancing innovation, speed, and ability to actually deliver in an environment that's changing rapidly. So risk management, top of mind for us, in highlighting existing issues that were already there in a university, but making them a lot more visible now. So we have a number of gates: governance, a risk gate, human oversight, evidence-led learning, and scalable assurance to provide assurance for both internal and external bodies on what we do, because we have to report on this as well and be sure of how we're using AI, not just for TEXA, but other regulatory bodies as well. So a huge amount of focus on what risk management means. One thing to note is, it's probably in my very first slide, we are taking this so seriously. Our Vice-Chancellor has just appointed a Pro-Vice-Chancellor AI, reporting directly to the VC, who starts next week. So what that means is that we have a whole office and a team that will drive this institution-wide. It doesn't just sit in fractional roles across the various senior leaders in our university. But what that means is this strategy, risk, governance, all now sits in one area that is accountable across the whole university. So this will get equal focus from a group that is reporting directly to the Vice-Chancellor. So I'll pause. Any questions for me so far before I talk about some of the learnings and the things we've done? I'll just pause for a sec. Anyone? I'm happy to take questions again at the end. Can't see any hands. No. So just an example of some of the pilots. Earlier, Tanya, you talked about Cogniti. All the unis are trialing and have deployed Cogniti from the University of Sydney for our students. We've used AI for curriculum design with our academic colleagues. And that's optimizing what they do. And some have embraced it more than others. It's not used consistently across all the schools. We've used it for subject scheduling. So, for example, crunching through what you would call effectively machine learning, but with an AI overlay on huge amounts of data to optimize progression and pathways, something that was done manually using spreadsheets and Excel and Access databases over time. We've used it for teach out. So courses that we have to teach out, can we rationalize them? Is there overlap? And can you optimize what teach out looks like? So this is just to give you a flavor of some of the initiatives over the last 12 to 18 months using AI. Trobe is a chatbot that connects into dedicated ServiceNow knowledge articles in our university, so staff and students can ask it any question. And it's learning. The first generation was a bit not so great, but it's getting better. The technology is improving, but relies on good quality data is probably a key message for all of us. Cogniti, we've got a bit of an insight from Tanya. We're using it similarly in terms of Cogniti. And then Microsoft 365 Copilot. Now, why Microsoft? We have a partnership with Microsoft. In a few years, it could be someone else. It's open AI now. It could be, my view is the technology, we should be tech agnostic. How do you drive adoption, change, control, and change the way people work across the organization? So it's very much change adoption-led across all of this. It's not about the tech. But the decisions on where we focus, what we do, are really led by Deputy Vice-Chancellor, academic and research. I'd say those two areas are real focus areas for us, especially when we're touching students for the next 12, 18 months. What's worked for us is get going. So we can't aim for perfection. We can't do things in a linear fashion. We can't wait to set up governance and then maybe kick off an experiment in 12 months. But how do you do this in a safe, transparent manner, ethically? So get going. You have to dedicate some time. So I dedicated 2 people. There's about 5 in that team now. You can make huge progress with a small team if they're dedicated and given autonomy and freedom to work within these boundaries. Look for opportunities. There's huge opportunities. I can tell you about 20 different things they're doing, things we didn't know about as you put it into the hands of people in the university. Think big, but act. Like you have to act quick, which is really challenging in institutional DNA. And I'm new to the sector. I'd say new. I'm not sure how long I can say that. I've been in there for over 3 years. But your ability to move and shift and change, you can do it. It just needs institution buy-in, especially senior leadership team, to get going. I won't go through all of them. So we do lots in terms of what's worked. And I'm happy to share all the materials and terms of reference and details and strategies with any of you, and what's worked and what hasn't worked as well for our university. So, Copilot, and we talked about adoption. So, how many of you have had Microsoft Copilot deployed in your organizations? Just a show of hands. It's pretty good. And how many of you have been through structured adoption and training before you were given the licenses and as you were given the licenses? Same show of hands? No. So the reason I asked that is we have learned that to drive real understanding of something as powerful as a co-pilot, if I can use that, really needed high-touch engagement and adoption. How do you train people? How do you understand their workflows? How do you create a community of practice so people help themselves? So for us, we started with 14 users to an active community of about 750 who are helping themselves, creating agents and sharing prompts and building context. But that's very high touch in terms of setting it up. My change in adoption lead, Ali, has done a phenomenal work to drive us to this point in time. But it then makes sense, and people start to feel comfortable and now are building their own agents and driving that change across the organization. The challenge is, how do I scale this from 750 to 4,000 and 5,000? So that's a different approach that's needed. But we found this to be very useful, and we have shared this with Microsoft as well. So they give you some generic training, but one person in my team has led to that. So you can make a difference. It doesn't need huge amounts. We don't have huge resources at our university. But just the right mindset. It's not technology training per se, but it's the adoption of something that can significantly change what people do in their day-to-day work. So what does this look like in practice? So let's talk about teaching and learning. Our law academics, especially the dean, is fantastic. He's built his own large language model. He's using it to change the way he will change teaching in law. So how do we support them? So how can we provide AI as a thinking companion in the law school? And how do we now give this to our students? So all those the lawyers that come out of our university, what skills do they get by coming to our university, and how do we incorporate that in curriculum? So that's one example. Another one is we have our internal strategy realization team who provide an internal consulting function for the university to deal with just curly problems, placement, end-to-end process issues, etc. So we use AI as a thinking partner to structure complex thinking, not just for prompt engineering, but really how do we help solve some really curly, complex problems. Another example is, an obvious one, is our comms and communication and events team in terms of the repetitive work. So that's the very simplest example of how we use it. But there's lots of other examples of things. Again, these are all from experimentation and building institution-wide capability across the various teams in the university. So what we're finding is we've moved away from framing, and I think we talked about it this morning, is that it used to be how do we keep the human in the loop, and AI is the system and humans are oversight, and it's shifting. It definitely is shifting for us. So for us, we're saying the human is the center of the work, but the AI provides the support around that. It's not the other way around. And so that's how we're designing workflows and what we're trying to change in our university as well. So very relevant to the shift in thinking and how work is designed in a university. It's very much about we have limited resources, unprecedented demand on the work that's needed in the university. But how do you drive this at scale? So it's reframing it. Now, not everyone is on board with this. We have staff that ask a lot of questions, a lot of real tough questions on what does this mean? What does this mean for the future of work, or the workforce in the university? So by no means have we worked it out. So there's still a lot for us to work through in our university. But thought it's just worth sharing that the framing and the context of AI for societal good is really important. One thing I wanted to talk about was physical AI, but I think we're going to run out of time today. But an example of where we've deployed physical AI is we have a Center for AI and Medical Innovation. So the use of AI, and NVIDIA, probably one of the biggest tech vendors now in the US, we deployed an NVIDIA system in a data center last year that accelerates the work required for vaccine development and to be able to analyze data. Now, we've seen huge increases by the application of AI systems to accelerate that. So there's some real-world impact that AI is having in the research side as well. So I haven't talked about research. We focus a lot on students. Our journey with students will be led by DVC Academic. So we partner very closely. How do you do this in a systematic manner through the organization and build DNA for them to change literally every school and every educator? The same on the research side. So DVC research is really key. Researchers, HDR students, which cohorts, who do we target? So it's a very thought-through approach on how we deploy open AI over the next few years. And then professional for me is a given. You know, everyone will have it. We will deploy to everyone and address the equity issue over the next few years as well. So last slide, and then I will take questions, is momentum matters more than access. And that's the key message, is you have to get going. So if any of you are struggling to get going, I'm happy to come along and talk, or bring our Vice Chancellor to talk to your Vice Chancellor and say, like, you have to get going and put the guardrails, put the controls in place, but you have to get moving and learn and experiment. And that's how you get that momentum in your organization. Governance, you have to have governance. And there's real tension. We haven't worked it out. It's a work in progress, I would say. Human judgment remains critical to what we do. So we're not outsourcing the decision-making or the human in the loop of what we're doing, but capability building is critical. And that has to be across the whole institution to be successful. Thank you.